Hello and a very warm welcome to yet another edition of World Panorama, the only show that gets you a weekly roundup of all that's happening in the international arena. I'm Teena Jha. Our top story this week is the Ebola crisis that has hit West Africa so hard that 4 of the severely affected countries have declared national emergencies. The deadly virus has claimed more than 1,100 lives and several thousands are battling the disease. With no cure in sight and the disease rapidly spreading, the World Health Organization has called on the international community to support the countries who are now staring at a humanitarian crisis. Today in our show, we'll talk about how the disease is no more a regional epidemic and the steps being taken to stop its transmission. But all that after a quick look at the big stories this week. World Health Organization warns Ebola outbreak vastly underestimated, says crisis to continue for at least 6 months. Death toll crosses 1,100. Ending the political deadlock in Iraq, Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki steps down to make way for Haider al-Abadi. Humanitarian crisis continues amid massive efforts to rescue refugees. Unrest in Pakistan as thousands of anti-government protesters flood Islamabad, seek change of guard, accuse Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif of stealing last year's election. And US actor and comedian Robin Williams found dead at his home. Evidence suggests the actor committed suicide after struggling with depression. Moving on to our top story this week. The ongoing Ebola epidemic in Western Africa has already been acknowledged as horrific, with 2,000 suspected cases and more than 1,100 deaths reported till Friday. But the true scale of the epidemic may actually be far greater. This has been said by the World Health Organization, which has warned that there is no early end in sight to the severe health crisis. The world body has called for extraordinary measures to stop the transmission of the disease. Take a look at this report. The Ebola virus, mere scare or an unprecedented threat? Panic-stricken West Africa governments are giving the answer, declaring public emergencies, shutting themselves off from the world. The World Health Organization is warning the crisis is much bigger than imagined. In a statement on Friday, it said, and I quote, "Staff at the outbreak sites have seen evidence that the numbers of reported cases and deaths vastly underestimate the magnitude of the outbreak. The crisis is expected to continue for some time now," unquote.
This outbreak is so big that without a lot of more specialists, clinical specialists, infection control specialists, public health detectives, the epidemiologists who go out and trace cases, lab specialists, communications people who go into the communities and help people understand what Ebola is. Without all these kinds of people, we will not stop this outbreak.
The WHO also added that extraordinary measures are being taken to prevent the spread of the disease. It's coordinating a massive scaling up of international response. Global agencies are also looking into emergency food drops and truck convoys to reach hungry people in Liberia and Sierra Leone. Both nations have been cordoned off from the outside world. West African governments like Guinea have declared a public health emergency. An estimated 377 people have died in Guinea since the outbreak began in March. Sierra Leone and Liberia have also declared national emergencies. Nigeria has confirmed 11 cases after a doctor who treated the Liberian man who brought the disease to Lagos fell ill.
The total number of confirmed cases is 11. Out of these 11, 3 are dead.
But millions of ordinary Africans are paying the price for the Ebola crisis, facing panicky quarantine orders and cancelled flights. Meanwhile, a consignment of experimental Ebola drugs arrived in Liberia from the US to treat 2 doctors. The drugs, the map, came in 2 boxes. The doctors will be the first Africans to take them.
Usually in the case of a pandemic like pandemic flu or SARS from several years ago or this, there are a few principles people agree with. First, people who work as healthcare professionals on the front line, they deserve priority because it's important that they be able to get back out helping people. And also we have to make sure doctors who treat people with Ebola feel comfortable that if something goes wrong, they will be taken care of.
Ebola is one of the world's most deadly diseases. It kills a majority of the people it infects. Symptoms include internal and external bleeding, diarrhea and vomiting. As on Wednesday, the death toll was 1,069 from 1,975 confirmed, probable and suspected cases.
And to discuss the story further, today we have with us in our studio Senior Consultant of Medicine, Professor M. Wali. Welcome to Rajya Sabha TV, sir.
Thank you.
Let's begin with the most obvious question first. What exactly is Ebola and how is it caused?
Well, Ebola, the name comes from the river Ebola, which is an African river. And this virus was found near this river and it was thought it has come from river. But later on it was discovered that it came from a fruit bat. And that bat is very common in the African region, forests. But the more serious thing about this virus illness is that it is like any other virus. But why it is so deadly out of all viruses that we have been experiencing, like SARS in the past and bird flu and all? Because the fatality rate is very high. It's about 90% in a full florid case. Number two, we do not have any treatment for this illness. And number three, we do not have a vaccine. And number four, its incubation period is very variable from 2 days to 21 to 22 days. So this all sums up into a larger perspective of this being very dangerous and very, from our angle, dangerous to the healthcare professionals who handle any patient of this disease. Fortunately, it has not yet been reported in India. And we are very careful. Our health minister took precautions right on the day one when the news broke out, and our health secretary is personally supervising day-to-day operation for this virus. The virus disease is like any other disease, so very difficult to identify. Like you have fever, body ache, muscle ache, bone pains. But the severe cases may have diarrhea, and more severe cases have bleeding, and when the bleeding takes place, we do not know the treatment.
Also, if you could elaborate, what are the ways in which this disease is transmitted?
Well, the beautiful thing about this disease is, which I would always say first, and most wonderful thing is that it is not transmitted through air. Like I can cough and if I have a virus, I cannot give it to you.
Right. Unlike
there
swine
has,
flu.
G,
Right.
very good. There has to be a person-to-person contact, bodily contact, either direct body contact or through the secretions. When we say secretions, that may mean saliva, body fluid, blood, or semen. And why I say semen is important, because even if a person is cured of this deadly virus, he can transmit through semen this virus up to 2 months. So this comes in picture. When the bleeding takes place, obviously it is probably incurable. So we have to isolate the patient, identify the patient, and prove that this is Ebola.
Also, sir, the WHO says that the disease, the outbreak is much worse than what is being reported. So in terms of that, how prepared are we? Are we prepared enough to tackle the situation if it arises in India?
Very much. You see, WHO's worry on the day one was because of the fatality rates were very high, because the disease is primarily located in a part of the world which is not so prosperous. They have very limited means to fight this disease. So it was more than declaring an international emergency, an appeal for the able nations who can help this part of the world to combat this disease, so that that disease does not travel to their nations. And we are one of them. We are also vouching that the disease should not come in, because if once this virus comes in, it would be very dangerous to treat, I would say, because there is hardly any treatment available. Specific treatment is not available. So we can isolate the patient. God forbid this happens. But today, as I have seen, the worry of WHO sounds a period of about 6 months precaution. And that's very justified because once a disease is prevalent in Africa, we have to take time so that this virus illness can settle. I would add to it that Ebola is not new to African nations. And they keep on having it, this virus, they keep on having it for last 10 years in their people.
This time around, it has almost led to a humanitarian crisis there, according to
because
the
you know there are 5 types or 5 strains, and we do not know which is virulent than the other one. Looks like this time the epidemic is of one virus there, which is more virulent, so more people are dying.
What is it that makes Ebola so deadly? And this time around, of course, the crisis is much bigger than the previous times that you just mentioned.
Yeah, maybe in Africa where this virus is spreading, initially it was not suspected. That is number one. Number two, the means and resources to combat this are not enough. So now since the things have come up and WHO has taken active interest and issued guidelines, it would be contained, and I'm very hopeful it would be contained, and there's no need to fear. I always say when we see something on television, we should not fear. And anybody having common flu or running nose should not identify himself or herself that I am having this virus disease. So that's very important. But at the same time, we should go to the doctor and ask for the test if needed. But I would repeat that persons who are coming from Africa aside or African nations who have been traveling like business people or students, and as it was said on the day when 45,000 Indians are there, we are worried about them as well. So if they are coming from this endemic zone and they are having febrile illness, which looks like a viral fever, which has no other cause for the fever, then it is very wise to go to a government hospital and identify themselves.
So, sir, since you said there is no cure for this disease, what are the ways in which the virus transmission can be prevented?
Yeah, very important is hygiene. And in hygiene, as I always say, hand hygiene is very important. Wherever we go, if we shake hand or we touch things, doors, whatever, or a patient, hand hygiene is very important. Wash hands with adequate sanitizer. Soap and water is the best sanitizer. We have many hand sanitizers available at the doorstep of wards and hospitals. Then do not go close to any patients from whom we can catch the infection, although this mode is not applicable to this. It is a general precaution. Right. Touching is more important, and those healthcare professionals who are dealing with the body fluids, secretion, blood, and so on, for them it is a greater hazard. So they have to be sensitized for taking precaution whenever they come in contact with that. They have to take precaution, and this is called grade 4 or level 4 precautions, in which we have to wear a protective gear which covers from the top to bottom.
One last question before we wind up our chat. This time around, the WHO says the outbreak is unprecedented in size, severity, complexity. So how challenging is it going to be for the world body to contain this disease?
For WHO, yes, early warning is the most important, which it has done, and they are keeping an observation, an eye on it. And they have sensitized various nations in the world to be taking precaution for it. And I think that is adequate. The fear and the magnitude of the WHO's warning was a little higher in this case because of reasons I have just outlined in the beginning, that the nation which is suffering from this has got less resources. So it was more of a financial appeal to help also. Right. And the medical caution was also there in that. And secondly, because today we are globalized, we are traveling, our students are there, we are doing jobs abroad. So everybody is moving, you see, and Africa is not far as it used to be in the past. So one has to take real precautions, and precaution is the good word, golden word in this.
Thank you so much, Professor Wali, for joining us this week and giving us all those vital details. So a word of caution there for those traveling to and fro from the West African nations. With that, we head into a very short break. Up next, After days of power struggle in strife-torn country Iraq, embattled Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki steps down, making way for his successor, Haider al-Abadi. Will the new government there be able to contain the humanitarian crisis in Iraq? We find out after this very short break. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. You're watching World Panorama. Moving on to the other big story this week. Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki has finally stepped down, ending a political deadlock that had plunged the country into uncertainty. The new Prime Minister, Haider al-Abadi, urged Iraqis to unite for tough challenges ahead. Meanwhile, in Brussels, European Union members held an emergency meeting to discuss plans to arm Iraq's Kurds to tackle the ISIS group. Take a look.
Facing enormous pressure at home and abroad to step aside, Nouri al-Maliki dropped his bid for a third term late on Thursday. Relinquishing his post, he pledged support for his replacement, Haider al-Abadi. Appearing on state television flanked by Abadi, Maliki spoke of grave threat from ISIS group before giving up on his fight to stay on.
والدفاع عن المظلومين والوقوف بوجه الإرهاب والطائفية وتقسيم العراق والحفاظ على وحدته واستقلاله وسيادته. استبعدت منذ البداية خيار استخدام القوة لعدم إيماني بهذا الخيار الذي لا شك في أنه سيعيد العراق إلى عهود الدكتاتورية والقمع والاستبداد.
Taking charge of a country that is facing massive humanitarian crisis, Abadi cautioned Iraqis for the challenges ahead and asked his countrymen to unite for the tough road ahead. He encouraged Iraqis to stand against the sectarian civil war. Situation remained grim in Sinjar mountain region where thousands of refugees are stranded. As massive international efforts are on to rescue them, some Yazidi refugees were seen fleeing Iraq amid growing violence.
Rising numbers of displaced people coming from Sinjar districts and Sinjar mountains have been crossing this pontoon behind me over the last 48 hours. According to the government of Kurdistan and the United Nations, more than 25,000 over the last 2-3 days have sought refuge and asylum in the Houk province, which is just ahead.
Meanwhile, EU foreign ministers held an emergency meeting in Brussels to discuss the conflict. The EU hopes to build a support group with Middle Eastern countries to help Iraq stave off the threat from ISIS. They also discussed plans to arm Iraq's Kurds against the militant group. France and the US have already begun to supply weapons to the Kurds.
And in news from the neighborhood, clashes erupted in Pakistan after an attack on a convoy of protesters heading to the capital city of Islamabad. The convoy was led by opposition leader Imran Khan. A crowd pelted stones at the convoy in the city of Gujranwala. Officials from Imran Khan's party said his vehicle was also shot at, but he was not hurt.
Thousands of supporters of Imran Khan's Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf and the Pakistan Awami Tehreek led by Tahir al-Qadri marching on Islamabad. The opposition aims to force Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif to resign and call fresh national elections. The protest is being seen as the strongest challenge to Prime Minister Sharif since he took office. Security was tight, with the government having secured the capital like a fortress. Trouble began when a group of supporters of the governing PMLN party allegedly pelted Khan's convoy with stones and shoes. Imran Khan's supporters also claimed that the huge bulletproof container carrying the politician was shot at. In the clashes that followed, scores were injured. Eyewitnesses claim the hundreds of policemen deployed to ensure peace failed to prevent the clash. The government denies involvement, denouncing the marches as an attempt to derail democracy. Imran Khan, on the other hand, says the incident will not deter him or his supporters from marching on to Islamabad. Both protest camps, Imran Khan's and Tahir al-Qadri's, want the Prime Minister to resign. They are angry about the sinking economy, growing militancy and failure to deliver core services such as a steady electricity supply.
In much needed relief to the Gazans, the Hamas has given positive signals about reaching an agreement with Israel in negotiations in Cairo. The signals came after mediators brokered a 5-day extension to the current ceasefire shortly before a midnight deadline on Wednesday. Despite there being some rocket fire from Gaza and airstrikes by Israel, the ceasefire held throughout Thursday. It expires at midnight on Monday. Both the Palestinian and Israeli delegations left Cairo for a break in the talks, which are expected to resume on Sunday. Close to 2,000 Palestinians have been killed in the conflict since the fighting began on the 8th of July. The dead include 469 children.
ما زالت هناك فرصة حقيقية لإبرام هذا الاتفاق بشرط واحد، أن يكف العدوان الصهيوني وأن تكف السلطات الصهيونية عن تلاعب الألفاظ.
And much else has been unfolding around the world. Here's a quick wrap of the other international news of the week.
Brazilian presidential candidate Eduardo Campos died in a plane crash on Wednesday. The private jet in which Campos was traveling crashed over several houses in the coastal city of Santos. 6 other people traveling with Campos were also killed, as well as at least 4 people on the ground. The plane crashed as it was preparing to land, and the accident may have happened due to bad weather. Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff declared 3 days of official mourning following his death. Militants armed with automatic weapons, grenades and wearing suicide vests tried to storm 2 heavily guarded air bases in Quetta, the capital of Pakistan's Balochistan province, on Friday. The attacks, however, were thwarted by security forces, which killed 10 attackers suspected to be foreigners. Officials said Samungli Air Base, which is used by the Pakistan Air Force, and Khalid Military Air Base were the targets of the militant attacks. The attacks come just 2 months after terrorists attacked the Karachi airport, in which 29 people were killed. 4 protesters and a policeman were killed in Cairo on Thursday, 1 year after government forces killed hundreds of Muslim Brotherhood demonstrators in the worst bloodshed in Egypt's recent history. More than 100 members of the Brotherhood were arrested across the country on Thursday for protesting and rioting. The Brotherhood, once Egypt's most organized political movement, was declared a terrorist organization last year, and its political wing was banned last week. Pope Francis arrived in South Korea on Thursday for his first trip to Asia as pontiff. On his 5-day visit, the Pope showcased the Vatican's efforts to spread the faith on a continent where just 3% of the population is Catholic. Pope Francis's third abroad and the first papal trip to Asia since St. John Paul II went to India in 1999 included meetings with bishops and South Korean President Park Geun-hye. During his stay, the Pope also held a mass for reconciliation on the Korean Peninsula.
Shifting gears, time to bring you up to speed with all the sports news that you might have missed this week. Here's all the sports action.
Arsenal prepared for the Premier League season by collecting the Community Shield with a comfortable 3-0 victory over Manchester City. Santi Cazorla and Aaron Ramsey, who both scored in the FA Cup triumph that ended Arsenal's 9-year trophy drought in May, also netted against City with well-taken first-half strikes. Joe Wilfried Tsonga beat Roger Federer 7-5, 7-6 to win the Rogers Cup and win his second ATP World Tour Masters title. The Frenchman's powerful display against the 17-time Grand Slam winner capped a fine few days in Canada that also saw him down Wimbledon champion Novak Djokovic as well as Murray. Tsonga becomes the first Frenchman to triumph on Canadian soil. It was the 11th career title for Tsonga, but his first this season. Third seed Agnieszka Radwanska toppled world number 1 Venus Williams in straight sets at the WTA Montreal tournament to clinch her first title of the season. Poland's Radwanska rolled to a comfortable 6-4, 6-2 victory over the American in just 81 minutes. Radwanska fired 3 aces, had 2 double faults, and won 65% of her first serves in the hard-court match on centre court. Rory McIlroy won the 4th major of his already impressive career after digging deep to edge a gripping US PGA Championship at a rainy Valhalla. World number 1 McIlroy saw his overnight one-shot lead wiped out on the front nine before taking control after the turn to win by one shot. He's now only the fourth player in the last century of golf to win 4 majors at 25 or younger.
Moving on, a look at what's creating a buzz in the show business, a look at the latest flicks and news from other arts and entertainment.
Oscar-winning actor and comedian Robin Williams was found dead on Monday. Police later confirmed his death as suicide from hanging. He was 63. Williams won an Academy Award for his role as a fatherly therapist in 1997's Good Will Hunting. His other notable films included Good Morning Vietnam, Dead Poets Society and Mrs. Doubtfire. Williams introduced his frenetic style on the late 1970s TV series Mork and Mindy as a human-friendly alien. Sylvester Stallone, Mel Gibson, Arnold Schwarzenegger and other cast members of the upcoming action sequel The Expendables 3 were on hand for the Los Angeles premiere of the film on Monday. The third installment of the hugely popular The Expendables franchise features most of the original cast with the exception of Bruce Willis and brings on many new members including Gibson and Wesley Snipes. Miley Cyrus may be just 21, but she's already lived a life full enough to fill a biographical comic book. The pop star's 2 decades in the spotlight is illustrated in the latest edition of Blue Water Productions' Fame comic book series. Cyrus, who is the daughter of country star Billy Ray Cyrus, made a name for herself as the star of her own Disney show Hannah Montana from 2006 to 2011. Singer Celine Dion has put her show business career on hold indefinitely, cancelling her Las Vegas show and a planned fall tour of Asia to focus on the health of both her husband and herself. She's not been able to perform her scheduled Las Vegas shows since July 29th, and the cancellation affects concerts that were booked through March 2015.
That's all we have for you in this edition of World Panorama. Before wrapping up, we leave you with visuals of India's 68th Independence Day celebrations. Enjoy and have a wonderful week. Goodbye.